8.3 Administrating Fitness Tests. So the first thing that I do was found out a bit about my client. So I did client profile. So I've got a bit about my client over this side, and then I had these questions which I got him to answer. I'm not going to go through them, but then the black is just the questions and the red is his answer. Then I got him to carry out this physical activity readiness questionnaire. I asked him the questions and he answered them, just to make sure that before I carried out these tests that there was no medical conditions which would affect his ability to perform these tests. He had none, so I was able to perform the tests. So the different tests that I wanted him to do was these down the side, and then I've just got the protocol of all of them. You can pause this. I'm not going to go through this, but you can pause this if you want to read it. And so here I've just got each test that I've got him to carry out and the protocol of each test and the requirements such as the equipment and the space needed. Here I've got the test and then I've got the benefits of the test, which I told my participants. So when I first met him, I first of all asked him the questions. I then got him to fill out this questionnaire. I then explained what he would have to do and the protocol of each test. And here I've explained the benefits of the test and the risks of the test, so he understands what he's putting himself in for and that he can pull out if he doesn't want to do it. So here I've got the benefits of each of the tests and the kind of benefits and the purposes of doing the tests as a whole and the risks of doing these fitness tests. I then got him to fill out this informed consent if he wanted to actually carry on and perform it. I then did a risk assessment for the area which we were going to be carrying out the tests. And so here I've done some of the hazards, such as slipping and tripping over, the people at the risk, and then the controls in place. So, slipping and tripping over, the people at risk, the client, others using the hole, and me. Controls in place, don't leave equipment lying on the floor when it's not in use. Make sure all bags and coats are kept to the side of the hall or in the changing room so you can't trip on them. And have tissues in case of water spillages or stuff like that, which could result in tripping or slipping over. And then actions necessary is clean up any water spillages if there is any. If an injury does occur, if someone does trip over, you make sure the client is okay and don't need to be seen by a GP or something if it's worse than that. And always have a first aid kit available if something does happen. Getting injury from performing the test is another hazard. The person at risk is the client. Controls in place is that their muscles should be warmed up before performing the test and should be stretched after the test, so make sure that he does warming up and cooling down, which is a great way of preventing injury. And then actions necessary is carrying up a warm up and a cool down with the client and having a first aid kit available just in case. Another hazard is dehydration, so the client could faint or feeling dizzy. People at risk is the client. And then controls in place is just make sure that the client is taking enough fluids during the test and ensure that they're drinking enough water before they complete each test and they're having some before each test. So once they've completed each test, get the client to have a drink of water and ask questions about their medical history before conducting the fitness tests. So if they feel dizzy regularly, think about how you can work your way around that. But my client didn't say yes, it feels regular dizzy or anything like that, so that's good. And then another hazard is hurt by broken equipment or just equipment in general, and this is the person at risk is the client. The controls in place is just checking all equipment is in working order and isn't broken before the client uses it. Make sure that's all in order. And then actions necessary is carry out the tests and checks before the client arrives to make sure that it's all safe to use and have a first aid kit available if there is an injury. These are the risk ratings for each hazard. C being a very minor injury which could occur, and 3 being the likelihood of it happening. So the number is a likelihood of it happening. So 1's very likely, 3 is not that likely. And then the evaluating the risk, so A, B or C. A is kind of major harm, B is kind of in the middle, and then C is not so that much harm. They're the risk ratings. And then here are the components of the fitness and then the tests that I've selected for each component for my client to do. And these are the justifications of why I've chosen each test. I'm going to quickly go through them, but very quickly. So for strength, I did the hand grip dynamometer. I chose to do strength because he's a rugby player and it's very important to be strong. And in rugby, strength is required in kind of all aspects. This can be paused and read over because I thought it'd be quicker like that. aerobic capacity. So I was talking about how one of his goals was to improve his fitness, and so I would be looking to work with him to improve his aerobic capacity. And in a rugby match, it's a long duration, so it's really important to be able to continue throughout the match and you be able to have a good aerobic capacity. And then speed, again, in a rugby match, it's very important to be quick. When you're running for the ball, getting a try, all aspects, speed is very, very important. It's better to be faster than your opponent. Muscular endurance, so it's very much about how long it would take for your muscles to tire out. So I wanted to see, how long he'd be able to continue the strength for a long period of time, and basically to see how quickly his muscles would tire out. So in a game situation, I'd be able to understand how long he'd be able to continue keeping his strength and maintaining his strength at a high level, and whether he'd be able to do this for the whole game, or whether at the start of the game he'd be much stronger and then by the end of the game he'd be much weaker. So I wanted to kind of see that. And then body composition, I wanted to see his fat percentage because, as I was saying, I've previously worked out his BMI in the health consultation, and he fell in the overweight category, which I was a bit surprised about, considering he's regularly goes to the gym, he does a lot of rugby, and so I felt it feels very inaccurate because in the BMI, muscle weighs more than fat, and so I wanted to do this BIA to see how much fat he did actually have, to see how much muscle he has essentially. So I was interested to see how much fat he does have in his body, so I could get a better representation of it. And then the vertical jump I wanted to do because rugby is a lot about using a lot of power, jumping for the ball, in a kind of offline throw where they throw it in. You're lifting someone up, you're doing jumping in the air. A lot of it is jumping, and even when you're doing a giant kick and you have to run, you have to jump as high because then you're more likely to get it the higher you jump. So I wanted to test his stunning vertical jump power, and if it's poor, I'd want to be able to improve and help him with that. So I just talked about the justification of each test in relation to his sport, but now I'm going to talk about the justification of why I picked each test. So the kind of advantages of each test and why I picked them. So first of all, the hand grip dynamometer for measuring strength. So I chose to pick it, one, because it was accessible, the college owned one, it was quick to carry out, it's a very quick test. The equipment is reasonably cheap. We didn't need much equipment to carry it out. It's very simple to use as well. And the ease of the dynamometer means that the client is likely to carry out the test in the same way each time, so they might do it with the same action, and this will increase the reliability of the test, as the results gained will be more accurate. Also, because the device shows the score directly on screen, it means that there's no room for human error when gaining the score, and so it makes the dynamometer a more reliable test, as differences in what people think and estimate won't affect the score. So that's kind of why I chose the dynamometer. The yo-yo test I chose was, again, it was accessible, it's quick to carry out, and the equipment was very cheap. The college had access to all the equipment that was actually needed. The test also has short periods at which the players can catch their breath and aren't continually running, which I thought was really good, as in a rugby match, players aren't continually running. They've got times where they're sprinting and periods of walking or jogging when the ball isn't near them. And so this enhances the ecological validity of the test, as it reflects more of a game-like rugby situation. I did the yo-yo test. I carried it out at the end after I carried out all the other tests, so that the results wouldn't tire them out. I mean, them doing the yo-yo test wouldn't affect the results of the other tests, so that's why I did that one at the end. So speed. So again, this test was cheap to carry out. The college had all the equipment that was needed. All was needed was cones and a stopwatch. It didn't need much equipment, and I adapted the 20-meter sprint to him, so I got him to run with a rugby ball, so that this will be more like a real life situation in which he's playing rugby, so that will enhance the ecological validity. As when my client was doing the sprint, he was holding the rugby ball, so this would be more reflective of a game situation, so it's more like his sport. Also, because it's quite easy, it can easily be repeated, and it's possible, and I was able to do it 3 times, which was good. Also, it could be carried out in quick succession, so I could do it one, then straight away get on with the next one. The equipment required was very cheap. For muscular endurance, again, it was very accessible, it was cheap to carry out, the college had all the equipment that I required for the test, and it was quick to conduct, didn't need much equipment. And then for body composition, the BIA is a very cheap way of measuring the BIA, as other ways of measuring it is a lot more expensive. It's the college had an owned one, which was excellent, so I was able to use that. And it's a safe and non-invasive method compared to other methods. And it was very, it's safe as the electrical current sent through the body is very low. And this means that my client won't feel worried or placed in a situation that scares them. And also it was very quick to conduct, and didn't require much space or anything. And then finally, the standing vertical jump again is accessible, quick to carry out, didn't need much equipment. Each jump takes a matter of seconds to do, and so it can be done very quickly. And also, because the device shows the score directly on the screen, it means that there's no room for human error when gaining the score again. And this makes the tachymeter a more reliable test, as people don't need to estimate it, as this won't affect the score as it's directly on the screen, which is perfect. So I administered the test with him, and these are the results for each test that I did in red. So test 1 that I did, these aren't in order, by the way, I actually ended up doing the yo-yo test last, but this is test 1. So the first test I'm going to be talking about is the yo-yo test, which is carried out to measure the person's aerobic capacity. My client got a score of 15.2 in the test, with the distance he ran being 840 meters. His VO2 max, which I'll talk about later, is 43.5 milliliters per kilogram body weight per minute. The level he got to in comparison with the normative data table for males leads him to fall in the below average area, so his score is 15.2. And if we put the level here, he would be falling in the below average area in the normative data table. The level he got before he had to pull out was below average, so he had to pull out at 15.2, so that's his level, and so it's below average. And the graph here shows his results here in comparison to the average score. This may not be truly representative, as he is only 18, and in the table, age isn't taken into account, which could be a possible reason for why he's falling below average. But from his results, this is an area of improvement that I would seek to work on with him, as he is much lower than is expected. So I have some recommendations that would help my client's aerobic capacity and would therefore enable him to perform better in the yo-yo test, getting him to a higher level, a higher score. So one recommendation is for him to carry out low intensity exercise with a long duration around 3 or 4 times a week. So I would suggest that he changes the type of aerobic exercise he does, so that he's working on different muscle groups and so that he doesn't get bored of doing the same over and over again. So I was just saying he could swim for an hour, or he could cycle for an hour one day and then run or jog for an hour the next day. So this way he'll be improving his aerobic capacity, trying out a range of different exercises, so he won't be getting bored, and working on different muscle groups. And this would, these are having a long duration. He doesn't need to go fast, but it's a long duration will be improving his aerobic capacity massively. So aerobic capacity, aerobic fitness is how the body uses energy when there's enough oxygen, such as the energy burn that occurs when running at a comfortable pace. Also, my client says he regularly goes to the gym, so I'd get him to do more cardio, such as going on the running machines or bike machines and cross trainers. So I would suggest he does this before or after muscle training, depending on when he'd prefer to do it. So before, he could do the running machine before he does his muscular training and the rest of his gym work, as it could warm up his muscles and could benefit him. However, it may make him a bit too tired to lift the heavy weights, so it could work better for him if he does the aerobic capacity stuff after. But we can test it on him and see which he prefers better. Another way to improve aerobic capacity is to eat a balanced diet. So making sure that he's eating enough carbohydrates to give his body energy to carry out exercises, as well as, of course, eating his proteins and fats in his 5-a-day. But carbohydrates are very important to eat a lot of, especially for aerobic capacity as you're going for long durations. So you need energy that's going to help sustain you and keep you at that pace. Eating a balanced diet will help provide his body with the proper nutrients and everything. It's also very important to stay hydrated throughout exercise and daily life. He should be drinking at least 2 litres, if not more, of water per day, as dehydration results in a fall in plasma volume at rest and during exercise, and decreased blood volume results in increased blood thickness, so increased viscosity, which reduces the venous return of blood to the heart. Also, body temperature rises faster during exercise when the body is dehydrated, meaning that the person is more likely to have to stop earlier in the fitness test or exercise. So being hydrated is much better for the body. So there's some of the recommendations I would do to help improve the area. So VO2 max. So this is the VO2. I'm going to talk about the VO2 max that he got in his test. So as we can see here, he got 43.5. So your VO2 max is basically the person's maximal oxygen uptake. So it's the amount of oxygen a person can take in and most importantly use during intense exercise or just during the exercise. So this measurement is usually used to find out the aerobic capacity or endurance of a person before or during exercise. So my client got a reading of 43.5. In comparison to this table for a rugby player here, so my client played rugby, so I've done it in comparison to a rugby player. Most have a VO2 max of 55. So here my client is lower, has a lower VO2 max than average rugby player. So a lower VO2 max essentially means that during intense exercise, his body will be taking on and using less oxygen than most. But with aerobic capacity training, I can increase his VO2 max. And a graph here shows my client's result in comparison to average rugby player. As you can see, it's lower, so I'd want to improve that. Here are some photos of him doing the yo-yo test and me administrating it on him.